So, good afternoon, everybody. Today we're going to be talking about data tables 1 and 2. Can everybody see my screen? Okay, good. Okay. Um, and so last week we talked about just kind of getting yourself organized. What are these data tables? So if you're just coming into learning about training grants, when you put together a renewal application or an RPPR, you're required to do data tables for, especially for the new and renewal applications. For RPPRs, you just have to do table 8. But these data tables, it's basically it's data on your program or your training program that you need to submit to the agency. And it asks for information about departments and programs and faculty members. These are the ones we're going to be going over to today, these two. It talks about all the other institutional training grants that we have on the campus. It talks about research support from your faculty, publications from your trainees, applicants' entrance and characteristics for your trainees, and then appointments to the grant, and then your program outcomes. So that's just an overall, that's what we talked about last week. We talked about getting yourself being organized and how important it is to be organized when you go to try to do this task. And I remember the first time I did a training grant, I think there was like 3 of us working on the data tables, and people were just sending it, bits and pieces of emails like, oh, here's this and here's that. I'm like, oh my gosh, there's no like spreadsheet to keep all this stuff straight. So leave it to me because I love a good spreadsheet. Anyway, so this seems funny, right? I'm talking about data table 2 first and not data table 1. And so data table 2, if you recall what I talked about last week, is your participating faculty members. And that is the key to the whole shebang there. You can't start gathering data if you don't know who you're gathering it from. So you need to know who the faculty members are on the grant first. So that's why I like to start with this, and then we'll go back to table 1. But I think it's important to understand, and I pressed on this last week, it's important to understand the rationale of each table and what actually NIH is looking for. Because if you just see, oh, publications, but you don't understand that, the actual what they want, that rationale, you may misunderstand the instructions. So that's why I like to put that in here. So if you get stuck in thinking, okay, should I include this? This is kind of a gray area. This is what works for me anyway. I go back to the rationale and I go, oh, okay, they're trying to assess this. And so sometimes that can help answer your questions. So participating faculty members, they want to look if on your participating faculty list, and generally speaking, I think I did an average one time. Every training grant has about 30 to 35 participating faculty. So you're going to have your project director, but then you actually have these faculty members that are going to be mentoring your trainees. And so I've seen, some grants as high as 100, 150 just faculty members. You have a couple of PIs, and then you have all these faculty members. But I think in general, it's about 30, 35. I've seen it as low as 12, 60, depends. So you're going to be collecting data from, let's say, 50 different faculty members. And the faculty members should range and vary between their junior and senior ranks, whether you want full professors, some associate professors, their gender, female to male. They look at URM status. I don't think URM is actually in the instructions, but I do know they look at the diversity of your faculty. They look at the research interests for sure, especially if you're doing cross department collaboration. So they want to know, is what they're doing actually, relevant to the grant and to this program. And of course, they're looking at all the different programs and departments that are going to be associated with this particular grant. So it's always important to remember this, and this isn't something that you will do, but it would be something your PI will do, is they're going to take this data that you give them from all these data tables, these hundreds of pages of data, and they are going to analyze it and in the program plan. And so there's going to be a section where they talk about the different faculty and their research interests and their demographics. And so it's always important to, do your due diligence, of course, in collecting this data as much as possible, that it's correct. But, sometimes it's you just aren't able to get 100% of what you're looking for sometimes. And I'll give you a quick example of that. So this grant that I just worked on, I was getting I was trying to figure out the ranks of faculty. It seems like it's a relatively easy thing to do, right? And I had several faculty that would say in their bio sketch, I'm an associate professor. And then I would go out to UCSD profiles, and it said they had been, they had promoted to full professor. And I'm like, well, like, what is it? If you go to Blink, it would have one answer. UCSD profiles has another answer, and then their bio sketch would have another answer. So sometimes I just have to go straight to the to PI and say, what's your rank? It's so sometimes it's you think it's easy to collect this data, and sometimes it's just like it's just a free-for-all sometimes, because you're finding so many different discrepancies. But anyway, just looking at the table, it's going to ask for obviously the names of all your faculty and their degrees. Usually it's their terminal degree, but I've seen some people put, like, if they have an MPH or something and a PhD, or MD PhD, they'll put 2 degrees there. Of course, your rank, whether it's assistant, associate professor, professor, whatever. And then their primary department. You can only list one department here. So if they have split appointments, say between chemistry and pharmacy, and this is a chemistry training grant, I would definitely go with putting chemistry here. Unless, of course, you're trying to, create this cross collaboration with, pharmacy. So it kind of depends, right? Again, it's sometimes you're going to use your discretion, and then follow up with your PI and say, what do you think? Is this, would you rather have this, or would you rather have that? And they can tell you. The research interests, usually, when I solicit and I send that email to the PI, I will ask them for the research interest. A lot of times you can just go out to the web, right, and find a research interest from them. But there's a lot of PIs that have several different research interests. So you want to make sure this one is relevant to what you're trying to teach, right? And it makes sense. I mean, some people I've seen, as far as grantsmanship, I'll see some people just go out and they'll just go out and copy and paste something and then just throw it in there. And it's like, that doesn't even make sense. You know what I mean? So you want to make sure it's cohesive. The training role, basically, they say the word preceptor, which is like this big word, but it's really just a mentor. So most of your training faculty are going to be preceptors, mentors. You're going to have 1 or 2 or 3 project directors, depending on your program. And then majority of them are going to be preceptors. And then some of them might be on an executive committee or another type of external committee or something like that. But generally speaking, they're going to be preceptors. So this is always an interesting data table, and as far as mentoring records, because how do you get this data? I mean, it's just not published anywhere. And if they're lab, they have lab websites, but it's not always correct, right? And people leave and whatnot. So this data usually has to come directly from the PI. So there's 6 columns here. The first column is how many pre-docs are in training in that lab. So you have Dr. Abrams Johnson. How many pre-docs are currently in the lab? So you see 1. And then how many pre-docs have graduated within the last 10 years? So they're saying that they've had 2 two people graduate with their PhD in the last, or PhD or MD, PhD, whatever, in the last 10 years. And then how many of those two that have graduated have gone into research, primary research careers, or research and related careers. So I think we could all agree, like a primary research appointment would be you go out and you work for Illumina and you're a scientist. If you go into academia and you're in science, right? You go into research. That's a primary research. And here they're asking, is it research or related careers? So I'll get to that in the next slide, on exactly how they define that. So, and it also not only asks about the pre-docs, but then you see on the second half, there's postdocs. It asks about exactly how many postdocs do you have in training, how many have you graduated, and then how many have gone into research and related careers. So one thing to remember is you want to make sure your numbers are cohesive. So I've seen it where someone will put, they've graduated 10 postdocs in the last 10 years, and then they write, whoops, excuse me, backwards. Then somebody will put like 12 here. Well, how is it possible to have 12 people that have gone in research related careers if you've only graduated 10? So, look at it logically, it can't be more than 10, right? So, it's just one of those things to remember. So one thing to remember, this note here at the bottom, it says exclude trainees from doing research rotations or clinical internships and residents unless they have began a currently engaged full-time research project within that the faculty members research group. So I noticed when I do a lot of training grants where they're, the trainees, the postdocs are they are in their residency program, and they take off of your residency to do, a research project. That if I ask the faculty member, they'll say, "Oh, I've got 15 postdocs that I'm mentoring right now." Well, you may be mentoring 15 postdocs right now, but there may be 10 of them might be clinical, right? They may be just doing a rotation with them or something. So they're not truly being mentored on a research project. So if I see high numbers here, my red flag tends to go up in my head going, oh, do they really graduate 25 postdocs in the last 10 years? It's possible, but it's one of those things. I was doing one grant and someone came back and said they had 150 in the last 10 years. I was like, really? And then I questioned him on it, and he goes, oh, well, yeah, I have a lot of people that do clinical rotations under me. And I'm like, well, that is not allowed technically. So if they just want to know about who's done full-time research. And I should note that when it's a pre-doc, a definition of a pre-doc is someone that is a PhD candidate. So you're not including undergrads, you're not including volunteers, you're not including visiting scholars or master's students in these numbers. It's just pre-docs and then your postgraduates. So again, research and related careers, it's just basically, anything that's not directly research, but it's kind of research related. So sometimes, they go and they are in tech transfer, they're doing policy, they're in the more of the administration side. That would be a research and related career. So the table 2 data, like if you're doing a renewal, it can be kind of upfront when you start planning with your PI. Usually that first initial meeting I have with them is I show up with a list of, here's all the faculty that you listed on the last grant, on the last renewal 5 years ago. And they're going to say, oh, no, that person's out, that person's out. Oh, we have new faculty that started. Let's add them. Let's add them. The PI needs to make that decision. They decide whether someone's going to be in or out. And really that is all on them. That's one of those things that you can put on them. And that is, again, your first step to data tables. I had a grant recently that I was working on. It was due September 25th. And we initially came up with faculty list back in April, I think, May. Okay, here's your list. And then all of a sudden in mid-August, they decided to delete 15 faculty and add 15 new faculty. And then the PI would turn around and say, well, why aren't the tables done? And I'm like, you just added 15 new faculty. I got to go out and reach out to them and gather their data. And so it's so important to nail this down at the beginning. And of course, there's going to be one or two that, someone never responds to your emails. You don't have their data. You got to scratch them from your list. Or someone goes, oh, wait, we forgot to add, Dr. Smith or whatever. So that always happens, but it's also one of those things you just want to impress upon the PI, like this really is one of your first steps. You need to figure this out now, and first and foremost. If you're the admin, if you're the coordinator for that training grant, it's probably one of those lists that I talked about when we were doing trainee tracking a couple of weeks ago. You want to continue to just keep this list up for the full 5 years of the grant, the grant dates, the program dates, because people come and go, people leave the university. If you have a new mentor that got added at the RPPR stage, you're going to always want to update that list. So this is kind of, one of those things, I kind of hesitate to say leverage data from previous submissions on campus. So I have to say, sometimes it's just really hard to get data from certain people. And what I will do, if I am submitting a grant, say for, I don't know, September 25th, and I submitted a grant just May 25th, and that same faculty member is on that grant for September 25th, I may just take that data from that submission and use it over. Or what I'll do is send that data to the PI and say, is this still correct? Do you still have one in your lab, or two pre-docs or whatever? And they may say yes. So that's something, as a centralized person, I have access to that data. But if you ever want to know, know about a certain PI or whatever, just email me and ask me, like, do you have any information on these faculty? And I can give you what I have, but you kind of have to take it with a grain of salt. In the sense that it could be antiquated, but it is a possibility, right? I did have somebody that on my last grant, they just did not respond, and we needed to have their data for because they were currently mentoring one of the students. We couldn't get a hold of them, so I did look in an older application, and I found their mentoring records, because there's no place that you can research that and find that information. I sent it to them and I said, is this the correct data? And I said, if you don't respond to me, I'm going to assume it's correct. They never responded to me. So I assumed it's correct. However, was it correct? That's a good question. So like I've said 100 times before, these mentoring records need to come from the individual faculty member. Now, there is such thing called a BioBib, which is, I don't know if it's a form. Holly, you could help me out with that. It's something that the faculty member has to fill out every time they get promoted, every time they get reviewed as a faculty member. They have to fill out. Is it considered a form?
So
questions, right?
Well, what I know is that the VCHS side of the university has been gradually implementing a form version of the BioBib. I don't believe it's live yet, and I also don't believe that it is applicable to the entire university. So the BioBib is essentially a CV, except it answers questions and provides data that is specific to their promotability, or their, to verify that they qualify for whatever their raise is. And they only update it every 3 years. It's not always truly updated.
Yeah.
And it's a personnel document. So you can't at this point get it from anybody else except the PI, but it can be a useful document if they're willing to provide you with it.
Yeah, I've had some PIs where I will say, you know, because you can always get those certain PIs when you're trying to gather this data and they're like, I'm too busy, especially if it's a clinician, right? They're like, I'm in clinic, I'm doing research, I'm writing papers. I don't have time for this. Okay. And then sometimes I'll just write back and say, send me your CV, send me your BioVid. And that usually on their CV, not always, they will list everyone that they've mentored and their role, or whatever, however they've mentored them. And so that could be helpful, right? But you know, you'd have to figure out the numbers yourself, but generally speaking, you know, this is the only data that can come from them. And I can't express to you how important it is to try to verify the home department and the ranks and the divisions. The ranks are just so important in a sense that you want to make sure your data tables, whatever you rank them as, associate professor, that their bio sketch that you're including in that application matches. Because I don't know how many times you'll see, oh, this says the data table says they're a professor, but then their bio sketch says they're an assistant professor or whatever. And you're like, what? The reviewers, I think that is probably one of those things that they will look at, and they do not like that if there's inconsistencies there. So the only problem with this is I have to say that Blank is not always reliable. UCSD Profiles is more reliable. If for whatever reason you have a question, just email the PI. If you know, and usually they're going to be happy to answer. I mean, I literally had someone email me an old bio sketch. She was a full professor, and she emailed me a bio sketch saying she was an associate. And I went back and questioned her. I'm like, aren't you a full professor? And she goes, oh yeah. Oh, I guess I didn't update my bio sketch. I'm like, okay. So, you know, it just you kind of, this is one of those things you just kind of question everything when you're doing data tables, and you just try your best and you do your due diligence on the information that you're putting in here. So FAQs for table 2, should undergrads or masters be included in mentor records? No visiting scholars, no volunteers. Can I list more than one department? No, you want to always list the more relevant department for whatever your application is. Should you include past faculty? No. They only want to see who's going to be currently on the training grant. So you may have someone that is was on the renewal, but then now they're not going forward. So they just want your current faculty. And then I think I already answered this. No, they don't want visiting scholars or visiting postdocs or something. Now, one thing to remember in their counts, you can include non-citizens, and it'll say how many pre-docs or postdocs in your lab. You can include non-citizens. Even though they can't go on the grant, they can be included for this data. So that's just one thing to remember. So I did have some screenshots here. I always usually like to do a live demo, but you never know with Xtract and Xtrain and whatnot. So I just did some screenshots on what this would look like if you were actually putting this in the ERA Commons and creating your data tables in the Commons. So data table 2 information is uploaded under faculty, participating faculty. And you'd have to go in and add each faculty. You could search by their name or their common ID. You add each one, and then you're going to start building a list of all your faculty. And then you have to go into each and every record and update their data. So their faculty degree, I say in theory, should be in there from their ERA Commons profile. When they created their profile. However, maybe it hasn't been updated. So, but you're going to have to be able to go in there and tick, okay, yes, include this in this RTD. The research support, which we'll talk about table 4, not today, but in the future, about how to enter that. And then your mentoring record, what we talked about today, you're going to have to go in and enter, how many pre-docs have they are they currently mentoring? How many have they graduated? And then how many have gone into research and related careers? Same thing with the postdocs. So this is something what it would look like. You put in all this information. So I can't tell you enough. This is like basically your starting point. You need to know your participating faculty list. Your first interaction with a PI saying, I want to submit a training grant, you're going, okay, where's that faculty list? I can start as soon as you give me that faculty list. Sometimes they'll be like, what, really? And I'm like, yeah, really. You can't start collecting data if you don't know who you're collecting it from. So there's a lot of times when I will have questions about a certain faculty member. Sometimes your faculty members say, well, include this person. And I'm like, okay, well, this person actually left the university, or, you know, they're not even doing research anymore. Are you sure you want to add them? And I always just double check with them. And then one thing this is something the reviewers will kind of look for, is any inconsistencies in numbers. So always make sure, if you're saying you have 50 faculty in table 2, the program plan needs to match and say there's 50 faculty, or, you know, your statistical numbers match. So let's go back now to data table 1. So and so data table 1, it looks at all the programs and departments that are going to be associated with this training grant. So it just shows what the environment's going to be. Is it going to be all chemistry? Is it going to be all chemistry and physics? Or is it going to be all social sciences and, you know, natural sciences, whatever? And because it's looking at the critical mass, the numbers of how many pre-docs, how many postdocs, how many faculty you have in each of these departments or programs. So one thing I wanted to put in here, even though we're not going over data table 6 today, but data table 6 is your applicants and entrance data. And those that are appointed to your training grant. This directly correlates to data table 1, because if you're listing, you know, pharmacology, physics, and chemistry in data table 1, those are the statistics you're going to be putting in data table 6. They directly correlate with each other. Something else that directly correlates is if you have a list of all your faculty in data table 2 and they're all from chemistry, but then you're listing data table in physics as a program that's going to be part of this a department that's part of this program, but you have no faculty in physics, then why are you listing them as, you know, a participating department? So you want to make sure everything's cohesive. Do you see where I'm going with that? Again, the PI has to have all this data, and they have to address this all in the program plan. So there's 2 sections to this particular data table. There's the pre-doc section, which is part 1, and then part 2, which is the postdoc section. And so you're going to list here in the first column whether it's, you know, a department, it could be a program, or it could be an ORU, something like that. If I have, like, I'll give you an example. I mean, I think biomedical sciences, that's a huge grad program, especially for health sciences. But if you have like faculty at Salk, I would just list Salk. I wouldn't necessarily list, you know, Salk, they're in the division of biology at Salk. You could, but I would generally just roll up all my Salk faculty into one. Again, it's a personal preference, but generally, you know, this is the general guidance. So, so one thing I wanted to say about this for parts 1 and 2, generally speaking, your application, if you're just doing a pre-doc application, you have to also give statistics for the postdocs. But if you were doing like a clinical program and there's no students in pre-doc research, just say, I'll give you an example, like we did an anesthesiology training grant, and there's no correlative pre-doc programs with anesthesiology. So we don't even have to do statistics on on the pre-docs because it's strictly a postdoc. So that is where you could become exempt from not having to do your part one applicant. Your pre-doc information for for part one. But if you are doing, I'm doing a pre-doc application for chemistry, you're going to have to also put in the postdoc data for chemistry, whether your program even has anything to do with postdocs. Again, they want to see the critical mass. They want to see how big your institution is and how big the programs are, how big your pools are. So it's a little funny, but anyway, regardless, it's kind of sucks sometimes, excuse me, that's language, but yet you're gathering data on postdocs, and we all know that gathering data on postdocs can be more difficult, and it's not even really relevant. Again, but look at the rationale. They want to look at that critical mass. So this first column, it's asking you for your total number of faculty in the Department of Chemistry. Now, then the next column is participating faculty. So how many faculty members are from the total number, which is 45, 14 of those will be participating on your grant. So it's not all of the faculty members here in that second column or third column. It's just the ones that are actually on your grant. And then you're going to list the number of pre-docs in the entire Department of Chemistry here. And then it's going to ask you, out of those total number of pre-docs, how many of those are on a T32? How many of them are basically on a NERSA training grant or fellowship, or sort of institutional or individual fellowship? And I'll get into where you can find this data. So they're saying out of the 38 pre-docs within this department, 15 of them are already on a fellowship, or HHS funding, as they like to call it. So that's a pretty high statistic. I mean, for these tables, half of your trainees are already on another an HHS training award. And then they're going to say the total amount of pre-docs with the participating faculty member. So they're asking, out of the 14 faculty you have, there's 12 pre-docs within those 14 labs, if that makes sense. So the last part of the table, because it goes on and on and on, is how many of those are eligible to be with those participating faculty. So this is where we come back to training, what we call TGE, training grant eligibility. And so you're going to exclude any non-citizens here. So it's asking if you have, they're saying 12 pre-docs with your faculty members. Out of those 12 pre-docs, how many of those are eligible to be on a training grant? And out of that, it would be 6. So you're saying 6 of them are non-citizens, right? And 6 of them are eligible to be on that training grant. And then if this is a renewal grant, how many of those 6 in the Department of Chemistry only we're looking at were actually on the training grant? So you can see here, based on this total, this is the total roll. There are 9 slots on this training grant, because 2 were from the Department of Chemistry. I think this is foreign physics, and then 3 in pharmacology. So 9 slots total on training grant. Again, this is where one of those things you want to make sure all your numbers are cohesive. You don't want this to add up to 13 and really you only have 12 slots on your training grant. And then that last row is totally not applicable because it asks about R90 or T90 information. We don't have that here at UCSD. Anyway, then the very bottom of your table for both pre-docs and postdocs, you're going to want to total up the number of faculty. So you see here at the top here and the bottom under participating faculty, it's 39 for both pre-docs and postdocs. And you want to make sure, okay, we have 14 in biochemistry, 20 in the neuroscience grad program, 5 in pharmacology, it's 39. And then cross-checking on your spreadsheet in extract, okay, I have 39 faculty on this grant. Again, making sure those numbers are all cohesive. If the PI is writing in the program plan, oh, I have 40 faculty on my grant. And the reviewers are gonna go, look, they only talked about 39, so which is it? And so again, it's one of those things you want to make sure all your little dots, everything is correct there. Holly, I know she came on camera, so did you have a comment about that?
I did, because in at least my experience, it is not always true. And I have an example I already pulled up that your faculty in part one and total faculty number in part two might not match. And the grant I'm thinking of, which was awarded, we only provided 6 pre-doctoral program, and yet we had 12, 13 postdoctoral programs with faculty participating, but we just put an asterisk at the bottom of the page explaining that some of these departments do not have PhD programs, but they may mentor pre-doc from other departments that do, which it also made our math very complicated. And so we had to insert little explainers. And
yeah, if I recall, I remember that grant very well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so yes, there are going to be, especially with health sciences. General campuses doesn't tend to get this crazy, but yes, because not all, like, so biomedical sciences, usually in health sciences, your pre-docs are going to feed from the neurosciences grad program, biomedical sciences program, or like say pharmacology or chemistry or something. But it's not as black and white when it comes to postdocs. And so, yes, sometimes there's going to be a little bit of a gray area, and you have to decide, do I want to put some asterisks here? Because otherwise the numbers aren't going to match up, right? So you also have, this should technically add up to, and something else to mention, you shouldn't be double counting your faculty. If your faculty member has a 50% appointment in chemistry and neuroscience, or say chemistry and pharmacology, but if you put in table 2 that they are in pharmacology, then you're going to be counting them under pharmacology, not under chemistry. So you always want to that's just one thing, you always want to make sure you're only counting them twice. But yes, there's always gray area, getting back to what Holly says, especially with health sciences. It can get so convoluted sometimes. I find it can get gray when you have these little ORUs where the faculty member is part of the ORU, and then they also are a part of a department. So that's one of those things you're going to want to discuss with your faculty, or you can put like the Department of Pharmacology, and then maybe in parentheses, this also includes, the Institute of Genomic Medicine and the Institute of this, or something like that.
Yeah, it always depends on the story the PI wants to tell.
It's exactly that. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. If you want me, if anybody's interested, at the end, I can pull out the PDF of that table so that you can see how we did it.
Yeah, and it's something, it's just, it can be wonky sometimes. Also, if you have the neurosciences grad program here, pretend this is neuroscience grad program. If you went to the postdoc side, it should be 0. There's no postdocs in a neurosciences graduate program, right? So sometimes you're going to have zeros there for postdocs, or vice versa. And so it can look a little funky. And it's just one of those things that you really want to, I always make sure especially after I know table 2 information, I know based on my faculty what departments and programs are going to be involved. And if they tell me, oh, yeah, I want you to include bioinformatics in table 1, I'm like, but we don't have any faculty from there. Oh, okay. Well, maybe when the renewal, they did or something like that. But you want to make sure everything is complementary to each other, not contradictory. So the data, collecting this data is, a lot of people come to me and say, where's the data, Jill? Well, unfortunately, the data changes every day as far as how many pre-docs or postdocs are in a department. A lot of times, I'll reach out to, if they have a graduate coordinator, I'll reach out to the graduate coordinator first. But you can always, a lot of times I'll just go to the website for, I don't know, bioengineering, and I'll count how many faculty member they have. I mean, I know it sounds kind of like crazy, but sometimes that's what you do, right? Because sometimes just trying to find the right person to tell you that information, it takes you, 12 emails to figure that out. So you can go to, we used to have really good reports in the legacy system. You could actually go in and pull reports on how many faculty were in a department. And then you also have to, define, well, what is a faculty member, right? Is it assistant professor, associate professor, professor? Are those ranks? Or are you including project scientists? Are you so, your definition, I always say whether, it's the amount of assistant, associate, and full professors in my, I don't include your project scientists or whatnot in the total numbers, but ARC can also give you some of these numbers. If you're looking for the total amount of faculty or the total amount of pre-docs, they can also tell you like how many of those pre-docs are on training awards already. Sometimes I'll go out to NIH Reporter and I'll look and see, okay, how many F31 fellowships, F32 fellowships do we have on the campus? And then you can sort them by department. Holly.
Why, yes, thank you, Jill. I was just going to point out that one of the things to consider is, just as an example, adjunct professor at whatever level means something entirely different at UCSG than it does at other universities, and reviewers may not understand that. There may not be room to explain that, and so I've had a handful of grants where we went in and we scrubbed all the bio sketches to make sure that nobody referred to themselves as an adjunct professor, just as a professor or a professor of blah, blah, blah. We went through and ensured the language was exactly the same, or tried to, throughout all of the bio sketches as well.
Yeah, totally. Marcia.
Thank you, Jill. So did you say that ARC can provide the data for pre-docs as well?
If you can find the right person to give you the data, yes.
Because I thought, what happened to me, they refer me to, they were actually very helpful, but they refer me to the grad school. So it was so hard, because when you said about 12 Mays, you're not exaggerating. You absolutely are not, because after you go, you look at the graduate school and you start digging there. And so anyway, I just want to clarify if ARC can also help with pre-docs.
Yes, I've received some data from them in the past. Again, it's kind of one of those things. It's like, depends on who you get. I hate to say it that way.
Okay.
As far as, but it is possible they can run this data. And I don't know if there are like reports in UC Path that we can do for this. I'd have to look into that closer. I mean, like I said, I know the legacy system's a lot better, and yeah, you could, pull that data, but yeah, it can be tricky. You could, it's not an easy task. I'll tell you that.
No, yeah, but yeah, thank you.
So I was just showing you this. This is showing you, this is table 2 here, and this is your part of table 1. Again, you're going to want to reflect, this is a listing all of your primary departments here for your faculty. then here's where you're going to be listing that statistical, how many faculty are in the Department of Chemistry, and then how many of them are participating on your training grant. And then how many, they're giving you numbers here for their mentor records that directly corresponds to the numbers in table 1. So say if you have, 15 professors, or let's say for the Department of Chemistry, you have they have 45 faculty in the department, but only 14 of them are out of that 45 are participating. So 14, you should think of it this way: 14 faculty in table 2 should be in the Department of Chemistry. You need to have these like directly correlated, and whatever numbers they tell you, you're going to have to add up between all those 14 faculty. How many pre-docs do they have for all of them? And then out of that, how many are actually eligible to be on the grant? And then again on the postdoc side. So again, it's just one of those things that you want to make sure things are cohesive. And anyway, any questions before I go forward on the FAQs? Any more questions, I should say? So just a couple FAQs. What does TGE stand for? Training grant eligible. So that's anyone that is eligible to go on the training grant is a U.S. citizen or permanent resident. And you have to be careful what you're totaling, because some are going to ask for the total amount of pre-docs. Doesn't matter what their eligibility is. And then there's certain columns that just say just those that are eligible to be on the training grant. So how do I know how many trainees are in HHS funds? Like I mentioned, Reporter, if you've never used Reporter, it's a really great resource out there. No login, which is great. There's no accessibility issues. And you can go in there and search by UCSD, and then search how many F31s are on the campus, and then you can download the data and look by department. It's not going to be an exact science, but it's pretty good. I also have on our website the amount of I have a list of all the training grants on our campus with the amount of slots, and then what departments. Now that again isn't an exact scientist. Again, it's approximate, because, and I'll give you an example. Like we have 70 grants, 70 training grants, or 50 T32s, and I'm losing my thought here. Say there's a training grant for chemistry, and there's 12 slots on that grant. Well, maybe all of those 12 slots don't go to chemistry grad students. They go to one in medicine, and one goes to one in physics. So it's not an approximate thing. It's, I like to say that this is cut and dry information, but sometimes it's not. I'm not saying make up stuff, but I'm just saying, just go with what the best answer you can get. So if a grad program, another question, if a grad program is cross-departmental, does one list just the program in column 1 or each department that is involved? So you want to list each department, and then if the grad program is comprised of 6 departments, but only lists 4 participating in the T32. Again, you want to make sure it correlates, right, with your participating faculty list too. So far as extracts, if you come back here, you're going to go under departmental programs. You're going to be adding in your programs. I would say most of your programs are in there. I use extract a lot, so a lot of them are in there. I've noticed there's duplicates. People have added duplicates over the years. And then you'll go in and say if you have 3 departments, you'll go in and edit each one and edit the numbers. And so some of this data you're going to know right away, right? If you go out and look and see, okay, there's 254 faculty in part of the biomedical sciences training program. But then say if you're still missing mentor information from your biomedical sciences faculty, you're not going to know these statistics until you finalize your data tables. So that's just one thing, to consider. So again, I can't stress enough about organization and how important it is to organize yourself. And so what I do in that organizing spreadsheet is when I list them all in there, then I have another tab that calculates it by department. So I can just go in there and go, oh, okay, this is how many, we have, like, say for example, there's 2 faculty and there's 8 pre-docs within those 2 faculty labs. So I try to make it as simple as possible for you. It shouldn't be don't make it harder than it has to be, but it's completely up to you how you want to do it. Anyway, I think that's about it. I have everything on the website. I have all the data tables on the website. I'll have today's recording on the website if I recorded it. I hope I recorded it. Doesn't look like I am, but we'll see.
No, you did. You are.
Oh, okay. I don't see like the little red light. Anyway, so important announcement. I will be off for the next 3 weeks. And then we'll resume office hours on November 9th. And we'll get back into tables 3 and 4. And then, 5 and 6, 7, 8. And yeah. Anyway, any questions?
So may I please ask one more question?
Sure.
I don't even know if this is a smart question or not, but if you were collecting, so you were collecting data for pre-doc data for table 1, and then somebody asked you if a research resident should be included as a pre-doc, what would be your answer?
I'm sorry, I can't do 2 things at one time. You said what? Last question.
So let's say you're collecting data, table 1, pre-docs. Contact the department, and then the person asks you, should a research resident be count as a pre-doc?
A what? Count as a pre-doc?
Yeah, because this happened to me at the previous submission. She was not really clear what a pre-doc is. The definition is like a pre-doc is somebody with a master's degree that doesn't have a PhD, just like you said in the beginning when you were explaining table 1 today. But a question came up if a research resident should be counted as a pre-doc.
A research resident.
Yeah.
So I would assume.
Sure.
So I would assume a resident is a postdoc for starters. So yes, you do have some postdocs, right, that are taking off from doing their residency and doing research for a year. So if you're talking about table 2 and their mentor records, if they're doing like a clinical rotation, I would not include them in the mentor records. But if they were doing, full-time research, yes, I would include them. But I don't know about a resident pre-doc. I don't know.
The research resident, a fellow. Then the other question, fellow, like a clinical fellow.
A clinical fellow. Go ahead, Holly.
I was just going to say it will depend on whether or not they have their terminal degree. So if they have a D or a PhD, if they have a PhD and be in the process of, say,
Holly's.
Yeah, it's
I
good.
don't know if it's me or Holly, but Holly's frozen.
I'm frozen. I confused that more.
I can't hear. I can't understand you, Holly. You're talking.
So I think, Joe, that it was the research resident, because I agree with you. Research is a postdoc, so then no, right? But
a resident is a postdoc, someone doing their residency, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember it.
Oh, Holly, you're unfrozen now that you're not talking anymore. Sorry. We missed everything you said, Holly.
I'm very sorry. Yeah, I was going to, I think all I said was that, if your resident, whatever their doing or pursuing has a terminal degree already, then
Since, yeah,
they're
Yeah.
a postdoc.
yeah, okay, all right, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think I find that a lot, especially, people will include, oh, I mentor, they'll include their undergraduates and master's students in their numbers when they send them to you. So you need to kind of make it clear, it's all about communication, right? That I'm just asking about, PhD candidates and then postdoc candidates. And I've had people, they send me their postdoc, records or whatever, and they'll say, well, I'm also mentoring another faculty member, someone that's like and I'm like, no, that doesn't count. It's someone that's, truly in like postdoctoral training.
So Jill, with my experience, I think people were clear about postdocs, but not pre-docs.
Okay.
Working, in the beginning today, when you were explaining, like that was very helpful, something for us to keep in mind, because I had several people that asked me, okay, can you please define pre-doc? Can I include visiting scholars? So yes,
Yeah.
pre-doc was a lot of confusion.
Yeah, and a lot of time they'll have one or two, visiting scholars, or they'll just, if say you have a first year grad student that's just doing a 2-week, rotation or 6 weeks rotation in their lab, they'll include that. Oh, I'm mentoring them.
Yeah. Yeah.
It gets a little bit loosey-goosey sometimes. So yeah.
Thank you.
My pleasure. It's good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Anybody else? It's 12:58. I'll give everybody their 2 minutes back. Okay, see you guys in a couple weeks.
Thanks, Jill. Have fun.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
So